Good morning, everyone. It's good to be together this morning. And we're starting this new series today on the parables of Jesus. We're actually going to stick to the Gospel of Mark. So you could do parables in any of the Gospels, but we're going to look just in the Gospel of Mark. And we have a number of ways you can see on the app that you can follow along, some things that you can do through the summer that will just hopefully give you ways that you can participate with the Scriptures, not just when you're here, but throughout the summer. Some things you can read, some different Bible reading plans, a whole bunch of different things that you can take a look at. So we talk about the app a lot, don't we? But it's because we're trying to be helpful. So, but it's only helpful if you take a look at it. But we're starting today, and have you ever heard one of Jesus's parables? If you've read the Bible, you've seen them. And I thought it would just be helpful for us to start with a very simple question, sort of an intro as we think about the series, which would be, why did Jesus teach in parables? Why would he tell little stories? Sometimes the parables sound like stories. Sometimes they sound like riddles. Anybody here like riddles? Anybody here have children? Because children seem to like these more than us, and that probably might tell us something about why Jesus does them. To be sure, there's a bunch of good answers for why Jesus would teach in parables. One would just simply be that the most straightforward answer is people like stories. You like stories, right? I mean, do you have a favorite movie? Yes. You do? Okay. Is it like, do you have favorite genre of movies even? Like I know I'll enjoy it if I watch something in this genre even. Like what would be some of your favorite movies? Football movies. Oh. Sci-fi. A heist. Like what's going to happen? Those are good. Those are good, right? Nobody here was willing to say romance, because I would have made fun of you instantly. So you're like, I know how Jay works. He's going to mock me if I say The Notebook. And I would have. So you were right. What is it about stories? Like, have you just really thought through that for a minute? What is it about stories that draws us in? And now that we have the ability to make really TV shows that are like movies, it's kind of an interesting moment to take in stories, and that so many of the great TV shows really are like feature films, but just every week. So they get to tell a story now over, I don't know, 20 or 30 or 50 hours, when before a movie would only be an hour and a half or 2 hours. Or if you like great movies, movies like The Godfather. I mean, I know you're Christian, so you probably haven't seen it, but those would be maybe even 3 hours if it was really long. But now we can tell stories over 50 hours, and stories do things to us. They sweep us in. They make us disconnect from our own reality to process someone else's reality. They force us to try to see through another's eyes, or to understand maybe a way of thinking or feeling that we aren't familiar with. Maybe another country, or another demographic, or another sociology. I mean, have you ever found yourself so taken in someone else's story that you end up rooting for someone you wouldn't have rooted for? You end up like hoping for somebody that you would have normally in your life not have hoped for. Something like a show that was like super famous, a show like Breaking Bad that did so well, it's like the worst person. But in the telling of the story, you're drawn into this like horrible descent. I've only heard friends tell me about it. But he just becomes this horrible person, and somehow, because you're invested, because you're in the thing, you find yourself like rooting for the drug dealer. This is the power of stories. Stories have the ability of making you think something you weren't thinking before, feel something you weren't feeling before, understand something that you wouldn't have been able to understand in a straightforward way. You take on the attributes and the texture of something. And a cursory read of Jesus would be that, he's telling stories so that he can make things apparent that weren't apparent. To make things that were clear that weren't clear. But I want to read a little passage to you. We read it a moment ago, but I want to continue it. It's very, very peculiar, which is the way of Jesus. He does things that you don't expect. And this passage is one of the most peculiar, because Jesus is asked straightforward, why do you teach in parables? And listen to what he has to say. This is in Mark chapter 4. I'll describe the context in a moment, but just hear the content of what he says. Mark chapter 4, verse 10, he says, when he was alone, the 12 and the others around him asked him about the parables. He told them, the secret of the kingdom of God has been given to you. He's talking to the 12. But to those on the outside, everything is said in parables, and catch this, so that they may be ever seeing but never perceiving, ever hearing but never understanding. Catch this, otherwise they might turn and be forgiven. I want you to realize how bizarre this text is. By the way, he's quoting from Isaiah chapter 6, verses 9 and 10. Some of you were around for our Isaiah series not that long ago. Remember, we spent a good chunk of time on this text because it's a pretty confusing text. So I don't have time to redo that sermon. Well, actually, I have plenty of time. You would not want to do that because it would be 2 sermons. Oh, anyway, but this text is really strange because Jesus says, and I'll just say it in common language, he says, I talk in parables so that people can't understand what I'm saying. Because if they understood what I was saying, they would believe, and they would repent, and they would be forgiven, and we wouldn't want that. Anybody confused? I mean, that's pretty strange. Like, wait a minute, Jesus, I thought the whole thing we were doing, the whole thing, was saying things really clearly in a way that people could understand them so that they would believe and so that they would be forgiven. Isn't that what we're doing? I thought that was the idea. And he's like, oh, no, we wouldn't want that. So maybe I should just end the talk here. That's because that's strange, isn't it? I mean, the entire way that you and I would understand communication is that you say things in a way that the listener can comprehend. That if you say something that's obscure or kind of veiled or confusing, that person is doing a bad job talking. Right, married people? Have you ever found yourself in a conversation with somebody different than you? Like, for example, like a man and a woman. And you find yourself saying what seems very straightforward for you, but the other person's like, that actually doesn't make sense. Why would you say that like that? That doesn't actually work. Anyone? Never? Okay, so like, and what you want to say is, you're doing that wrong. If you were to do this right, I would understand it. You're doing it wrong. Not that I'm not able to hear, but that you're not able to speak clearly. We're going to need some marriage counseling at the end of this. Guys, we do know great marriage counselors in the city. Okay, so seriously, it is worth pausing to ask, what in the world is happening here? Why is Jesus saying this? Why is he saying he's talking this way? And I think there's a couple reasons why that I want to explicate for you. I think there's more than one reason why, which we'll be able to talk through as we look at the parables independently. But I think it's important for us to lay out some of these markers because, frankly, they help us read the parables. But more than that, I think they help us understand what it is to really, truly learn and to become more like Jesus, to become the kinds of people God is trying to make us into. It means a number of things. And some of you might have answers right now, but if you don't, let me give you a couple thoughts that I think we'll learn as we learn about the parables, okay? One would be, when God is speaking to us in the scriptures, not just in the parables, when we're reading the Bible, it's important to realize that you think you're reading the Bible. You think, I come to the Bible with a set of questions. I come to the Bible with a life I'm trying to live. I come to the Bible with my framework for life, and I come to the scriptures, and I'm trying to get the scriptures to help me to understand how to live my life better. How do I find an answer to this question about what's the meaning for my life? How do I find an answer to this question about how I am a better husband? How do I come to the scriptures to figure out what it means to have a family, or what it means to become a better person? So I'm coming to the Bible and I'm reading the Bible so I can get information. Right? Anybody think that's kind of how it works? That's actually not exactly how it works. What's actually happening is you think that you're reading the Bible, but here's the truth. The Bible is actually reading you. You start to realize there's things about you that don't make sense. That what happens when you come to God is less that God is on the witness stand and you're interrogating him. But it's more that you're on the witness stand and he's interrogating you. You have to decide to allow the scriptures themselves to search you, to let God search you, to have it so that it's less that you're reading the Bible, but the Bible is reading you. And the vast majority of people that come to God are not coming in this posture. The vast majority of people that come to God think as though they're actually in control, and they're going to try to get God to do what they want done when it just doesn't work like that. The way that you truly are transformed in a life with God is when you come to God expecting him to interrogate you, to expect him to search who you really are and who you could become. To put it flatly, the parables reveal how curious you are. Are you curious? Have you ever just come up against something that just doesn't make sense to you? Have you done math? We all have different load limits for math, right? I mean, I'm sure in a room this size, there's some people that are just like super geeks. You just all the math. You're still doing math. I have a few friends that do math just for fun as adults. These are sick, twisted people. For the rest of us mortals, you hit a moment when you're doing math where you're like, this is the dumbest thing ever. And so many of us, we hit an edge at math where we're like, I'm so glad I'm doing no more math. Right? Anybody want to do math right now? Like, okay, so most of you are like, like quadratic formula, go. Exactly. You don't know it. You don't want to know it. You hit an edge where you're like, I know this is supposed to work, but I don't care. I don't want it to work for me. Right? You hit an edge. It isn't just in math. It's in every area of your life. There's other parts of your life that your curiosity, your willingness to work to understand slowly begins to diminish. See, here's what Jesus is doing when he tells a parable. He's telling a story that's confusing or doesn't quite add up. or there's a twist that doesn't seem to make sense. And what he's really doing is seeing, he's again, this is reading you. Do you really care enough to understand? Are you willing to lean in and ask another question? Are you willing to allow your mind and your heart to be drawn toward, not just away? In other words, are you willing to allow God to tell you who you are as opposed to you telling God who you think he should be? I'm sure you've had this experience. Does any of you have a friend that they just tell stories that are too long? Some of you are elbowing each other. That's not nice. They're too long, or they're obscure, or you can't really tell what the point is. Is this going along? Anyone have, if you don't know someone like that, it's you. No one's told you. I'm here, you learned something today. It's you, because there's lots of people like this. Like they go to talk to you, and they're like, hey, let me tell you this crazy thing that happened. Here's what happened. It was a little cold. And I was wearing those shoes, but not the shoes they were a different kind, but they were similar to that one. You're like, oh my gosh, just tell the story. What did the shoes have to do with the story? Oh, nothing. I just thought you'd find it interesting. I don't find it interesting. So even in that, seriously, even in that, what's happening? You're deciding, do I care enough about this person? Do I care enough about what they're telling to actually hang in there? Okay, now Jesus isn't that kind of storyteller. I mean, he's not a bad one. He tells stories that can offend you, that confuse you. I've heard this quote more than once, so much that I don't even know who to attribute it to, which is that God often will offend the mind to reveal the heart. God will say things that will bother your thinking to see if your heart is inclined toward him. He'll say things that agitate you in your thinking, like the two things that don't seem to fit together, to see, does that move you toward him or away from him? He'll say something about your money, or about how you should think about your body sexually, for example, or about your relationships. He'll say things to make it to see, are you just immediately the kind of person that says, I already know what I'm doing, no thank you? Or are you the kind of person that says, that is so strange and off-putting and confusing. I wonder what that could actually mean. Could that be real? Are you drawn toward, not just away? Because here's the ultimate question is, do you, the people that are interacting with Jesus through the Gospels don't realize who he is. They're the kind of people that have read so much of the Bible that you would think they would recognize Jesus instantly. They're the kind of people that have so many thoughts about God in their mind that it should have made it so they could see Jesus really quick. And actually, they have so many thoughts about God in their mind, it makes it so they're not able to see him at all. Those of you who've been raised in church, like a lot of your life, this is really important you hear me right now. You can have so many Christian thoughts in your head that you're unable to hear the actual voice of God. You've constructed some kind of view of God that makes it so that you think of yourself as the authority. Like I have so many cool thoughts about God that I kind of know how God works, to where God himself could try to speak to you and you would be unable to hear him, because you lose track of who is the actual authority that's standing in front of you. It's graduation season, so I thought about this story I had when I was graduating high school. I went to this graduation party, and I went to the buffet at the graduation party, and it was a Wendy's buffet. First, I was like, that's kind of bad, and then I was like, that's actually pretty great. Wendy's is great. And so there I am at the Wendy's buffet, and there was the salad bar, and there was like a potato bar, and then there were burgers. I skipped right past the salad, of course. That's what my food eats. And that was a good joke, if you never heard it. It'll take you a second. You'll get there. Just catch up. And I skipped past it, and the guy in the line behind me made fun of me, older guy. He says, "You got to get your salad." I go, "I'm not getting salad. I don't really like salad, but if I was going to get salad, I would not get this salad." He goes, "Why not?" I go, "Wendy's salad is always kind of weird. It's like a weird taste. It's got like a chemical-y vibe." He goes, "Really?" He goes, "How'd that happen?" I go, I don't know. Who cares? I just don't want to do it. And then we're at the potato bar, and I got one bit. He goes, "What do you think of the potato bar?" I go, "Well, it's a potato bar, but the cheese is more like wax than cheese." And so we do this. We do this all the way down. And I'm like, this is strange. Anyway, I sit down with my friends. And as I'm sitting down with my friends, they were like, "Hey, I saw you talking to that guy." I said, "Yeah." And they go, "You know who that was?" I go, "No." They go, "That's Dave Thomas. It's the founder of Wendy's." It's possible to be next to someone and not know who they are. And to think you're an expert without knowing the person you're talking to. Do you honestly think that you can be enough of an expert that God himself can't speak to you? Do you think that you're able to walk away from certain parts of the Bible, for example, or the wisdom of God, because you kind of know the better way? There's a guy named Andrew Murray. It would take too long to describe who he is. You'll just have to trust me. He's an interesting guy. He wrote a book that's literally just called Humility. That's what we're talking about. And listen to this quote from Andrew Murray from his book Humility. He says this: "Humility is the only soil in which virtue takes root. A lack of humility is the explanation of every defect and failure. Humility is not so much a virtue along with the others, but it is the root of all, because it alone takes the right attitude before God and allows him as God to do all." See, this passage in Mark chapter 4 is actually on the heels of a parable that's called the parable of the soils, is generally what we call it. And we'll talk about that parable in 2 weeks, but it basically says there's 4 different kinds of soil, and depending on the soil, that depends on if the seed will take root. Which kind of soil? And the soils are people's hearts. That the seed is good. What God has to offer you is good. His truth is good. His life is good. What his Spirit offers you is good. It's good. The question is your soil prepared to receive that seed? And Jesus' basic argument is, mostly it's not. And Andrew Murray's basic argument looking at that parable is to say, there aren't a lot of things that are in your control about how your life is going to go, but there is a couple things that are in your control, and one of them is, will you be the kind of person who is curious and humble and willing to learn? And however humble you think you are, you can be more humble. Humility is one of those funny things where, if you think you're great at humility, it's an extra big problem. Like, if you're like, as far as humility goes, I am the very best. That in and of itself means you're probably not very humble. And so the basic argument, I think, of a lot of the New Testament, which is, we're back to the very beginning of when I was talking to you, is that you're to become like a little child. The main way of spiritual growth is to be curious, to be humble, to be willing to learn, to be interested and excited in things that confuse you or surprise you, that you should be drawn toward not that which just confirms what you already believe, but drawn towards that which challenges your beliefs, makes you start to wonder, is there another thing to explore here? Is there a way to understand that I've not considered? And this is the way of the parables. In these ways, Jesus often starts a parable by saying, this is how the kingdom of God works, or this parable tells something to you about the kingdom of God. And I think you can make a strong argument, and I will over the next number of weeks, that Jesus' ministry is a ministry of imagination. He shows up and says, I know you think it works like this, but what if it worked like this? I know you think that in all your study you understand how it is, but what if it's bigger than that? What if what God has for you is more expansive than that? What if God has for you is more beautiful than you could have imagined? What if he's more kind than you could imagine? What if he's more loving? What if he is more merciful than you've ever imagined? And there might be some of you here that you haven't been raised in church, and you don't have a life with God. And I don't know how you got here today. Somebody tricked you in some way. But I guess what I want to tell you is what Jesus did is he showed up and he confused people so that their imagination might expand. People who had no life with God were regularly amazed with Jesus because he showed them a way that God worked that they had never imagined possible. And I think that's what the parables do. They make us think about God in ways that we wouldn't naturally do in our nice little religious systems or a straightforward way of understanding God. And I would like to encourage you to come along with us. I think this will be a fun series for us to be challenged, to imagine differently, and to tell stories differently. But here's the basic question for us as we move into this series. Are we willing to be curious, to be humbled, to soften our hearts, and to move toward maybe areas of our life that we thought we already had it figured out? Like, if you're married here, you're probably not the husband that you need to be or the wife that you know you could become. I'm sure your spouse from time to time reminds you of that. And instead of that putting you into a defensive posture, could that be the kind of thing that moves you into a learning posture? I'm sure you're not the parent that you wish you could be. Instead of that putting you in defensive posture, could you put yourself into a learning posture? I'm sure you don't have the prayer life you wish you had. And instead of that making you defensive, what if you moved more curiously? I imagine you're not as generous as you would like to be, or as hopeful. How many things do you want me to list? Did I get you yet? Do you want me to keep going? Kind. Maybe you're not as brave. Whatever those things are, just notice in yourself, does that create a defensiveness or a curiosity and a humility? That is up to you. That's up to you. It's up to you. Are you the person that moves towards those things or away from them? And I think in this series, and hopefully in this season, we have an opportunity